Make that loud.
Well, good afternoon. And once again, it's my pleasure and privilege to have an interview and conversation with Jack and Margy Flynn. And this is about the Constitution, our constitutional rights, and our birthrights, our inalienable rights, our unalienable rights. And this is part 3 of a series, an ongoing series. And I want to welcome Margy and Jack.
Greetings. It's good to be
Good to
here.
see you, Kathleen.
Great to see you both. Well, we had a lively and extremely informative part 2, which ended up being censored. So anyone who is interested in seeing that, please go to Odyssey at Seaside Reflexology. It's under Kathleen Dudley. And I wanted to pick up on something that we talked about last time, Margy and Jack, and that was, we began to talk about how the Constitution was put in place in the United States. And what came to me was a question of how many other countries have put constitutions in place and how have they fared? And if you could maybe start, and Margy, if you could start with that today.
Sure. There are many other countries that have constitutions. Canada has a constitution. Australia has a constitution. I believe New Zealand does. Ireland, other
Germany,
countries, Germany,
England.
France, many countries have constitutions. Unfortunately, just like in America, the people in these other countries have not really been guardians of their constitutions and not guardians of their rights. In other words, they kind of took it for granted that because there's a document that says they have rights and that government is supposed to uphold those rights, that's all they needed to do. They didn't have to make it a personal issue unless and until something happened to them that was untoward. And at that point, then they would start advocating, well, what about my rights? And it was then that most people got the clue that, well, just because they're written down in this paper doesn't mean that the people that are operating the machinery of government are doing anything properly to uphold your rights. And in this country, public officers take oaths. And I believe they do in other countries as well. And those oaths mandate the public officers to uphold the constitutions, superior to any other form of law or any other action. That means that if there's an issue with somebody who's been, let's say, detained by the police for some reason, that this person, this human being, has the absolute guaranteed right to receive due process of law at every stage of the set of circumstances. Most people don't know that. They think that the police can do anything they want to them, and that is completely false. The police are obligated when they take that oath to uphold the rights of people. But the people don't know this. So they don't say, well, excuse me, sir, but you took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, didn't you? And that's going to put the cop off his balance just a little bit and say, pursuant to that oath, you have to abide by the Constitution in everything you do in your job. And that means you have to uphold my rights. And my rights include due process of law. And what you're doing to me right now violates due process, sir. So if this goes further, I'm going to prevail because I have the law of the land on my side, and you have perjured your oath by your actions. And I will take further action against you if you don't cease and desist right now. This is how people have to respond to tyranny, because we're facing tyranny on many levels right now. I think we all know what we're talking about. And if the American people and the people of other countries don't recognize their inherent political power, which comes to them as a package deal from the creator endowed rights that all human beings have, if we don't recognize this and we don't put a stop to what's going on, the corruption in the machinery of governments everywhere, then all of us are going to be living lives of misery and slavery. And that doesn't work. This doesn't work.
For me either. And Jack, can you add to that?
I think Margy summarized it very well. There are many, many different countries that have constitutions. just like the American people, who as a society, and of course, there are always individuals who are the exceptions, but as a society, the American people have never held any government in this country, especially the national government, to the constitutional mandates imposed upon them. It's never happened once. Now, in other countries, they've done it. If you take a look at England, to a certain extent, they have a revolution roughly every 50 years, okay? If you go throughout their history, all right? We've had one revolution, one, and that was against King George. We never lawfully revolted against our own government, okay? We should not ever get involved in a military situation against our own government, because that's total insanity. That won't work at all. But as a lawful revolution against the government, we can do that. We've never done it. How many revolutions have other countries had compared to the revolutions here in the United States?
Wow, I know Argentina had 18 during the lifetime of a dear friend of mine who lived there. That blew me
Insanity.
away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Nothing's a chaos.
Yes, the problem with revolutions is that the revolutions are started by the same power force, but on a different level, okay? So when people fight in revolutions, thinking they're going to obtain justice in their own country and some type of fairness, some type of equity, some type of fair treatment in all areas, not only civil rights or their constitutional rights, but right across the board. The problem is that people who take over are just as bad as the people they took out, okay? And the people have never once solved that problem. They've never once solved the problem. So we have a great opportunity here in the United States of America right now to solve the problems being perpetrated upon us by our own government. How many people have been affected by the unlawful orders of government, federal, state, and local? Not only the federal government, all governments in this country, federal, state, and local. And like I told you before, I think in our first interview, Margie and I have told people from the very beginning of our work, and we've told them things that they don't like to hear. And a lot of people resented what we said. But if you look back at what we said, it's all true, okay? We've told people that America is the most successful communist nation on the face of the earth, and this shocked people. But if
They're pretty ticked off.
if you look at the history of America from the very beginning, it has been a communist nation serving communism, who are controlled and in league with the central bankers. And that's what we have. We have it right now. And right now we have, I call this guy, call me Uncle Joe Blow, okay, the acting president who stole the election, the one man, one rule dictator. That is classic communism, classic basic communism. And the people still don't see it. They don't see it. Now, yeah, there are people, there's a small percentage of people in this country who see it. The larger percentage still doesn't see it, just like the larger percentage has never seen anything. I mean, how do you get 80 million people to go to war unless they're insane, okay? Unless they don't know what they're doing,
Brainwash
okay?
them.
And fighting for the wrong side in the war, which is upholding the communist position. Okay, it makes no sense. So now the American people are being hurt personally. And the American people only respond, not when you're hurt, or the guy down the street is hurt, or Dugan is hurt, or anyone else is hurt. They only respond when they're hurt. They don't care about you or Dugan or anyone else. But when it comes to them, they care. Well, you've got 80 million plus Americans who are being pulverized right now, either get the jab or get fired, okay? This is a major play that has untold after effects, okay? Any economic condition, adversely or beneficially, affects the entire society. Think of 80 million people being thrown out of work. Think of what that will do to this entire country.
Wow.
So now the people have the opportunity, because they're being personally affected and personally damaged, to take lawful effective action, which is why we sent out the affidavit.
Well,
And
And actually, Jack, I would like to take a moment and talk about that if we could. So Margie and Jack have been doing some very deep work on putting together an affidavit in response to the work situations of the devastation that's happening. People don't take the jab. They're being told they have to leave their employment. And so this affidavit, Margie, maybe you could start then and talk about it. Jack, you just go in at any time you want to add something, obviously, and tell us what you did and the importance of it and the potential outcome of people using this affidavit and moving it forward from one computer to another until it spreads like wildfire around the world.
That's the goal. Well, as you can imagine, we get a lot of calls and emails from people all over the country, and sometimes from other countries too, telling us what's going on, and they're concerned about the draconian measures that are being imposed upon. And over the last couple, 3 weeks, we've had a lot of people contact us because they're being threatened with being fired by their job providers if they don't take the jab. So we thought, let's put something together that's going to be generic. And we'll put a lot of meat into it in terms of why the jab is harmful and why it poses a real threat to anybody who would take it. And then people can pick and choose which ones they think are most appropriate for their circumstances, put in their own circumstances as to how this jab will harm them physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, what have you, if they lose their jobs. And then we put it together and we sent it out via email to a lot of different people who had requested help, and then turned to other people that we knew who were also thinking about something like this, but hadn't quite gotten around to putting it together. And on Tuesday, I did a radio interview with Scott Richardson on Snafu Radio, which is on YouTube. And I did maybe a 14-minute piece just explaining the affidavit and how it can empower people, because they have the right to stand up to any form of tyranny.
Margie, could you spell out the name so that people can find that on YouTube?
Yes, it's an affidavit for people who are being mandated to get the jab or get fired. Words to that effect. I don't know how Scott phrased it, but I do have a link on the YouTube, and all they have to do is go to Snafu Radio.
SNAFU. Snafu Radio.
YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. So you just go to YouTube and type in Snafu Radio and then.
Yeah, it'll click on the YouTube channel link. It'll come up, and then above the current one that'll be there, there'll be videos. Click on videos, and that'll show this one. It's the meme that's on this particular interview is Fauci. So you can't miss it.
Okay. So, all right. I don't know if that's a word we can't say or we can.
Perfectly good word. A lot of people have that name.
Okay, good. All right.
No copyright on it.
Okay, cool. Well, you never know. I mean, there are certain words that seem to kick us off.
I know, but I'm not using the whole title, so I think they can just go.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Anyway, the YouTube actually, as of today, there were well over 6,000 views of that YouTube. And that is good because it is spreading the word to other people who are commenting and saying, this is just what I needed, or my daughter needs this. And so it's going out like wildfire. And what we're asking people to do is to share it with others, possibly post it on a social media platform that won't dump it and ban it, and just continue to get the word out, because the people have to be empowered. They need to know that government does not have the right, because it has no rights. It either has authority for its actions or it doesn't. And they have no lawful authority to mandate anybody do anything that affects their physical body, their health. It's not a power delegated to government. we individuals have the power because we are guaranteed the right to life, liberty, and property. Fifth Amendment, guaranteed. And so our life, our body is our life is our body. Our body is also our most precious private property, which we can choose to do with as we want. And that's where liberty comes in. We have the liberty to make a choice to say, yes, I do, or no, I don't. So this mandated scenario, forcing people to take a jab, is an absolute deprivation of rights on multiple levels, blatantly unconstitutional. And if the people can understand that they're in the right and that the people that are pushing this on them are in the wrong, then they might have the temerity to say, you know what, I'm going to use this affidavit. Because what we want them to understand is their bosses, their work providers, their corporations and businesses, they are acting under threat from the government because they've been told that if they don't push this jab, that they will be fined $14,000 a day for each one that doesn't take the jab. And it goes on from there. So they're using extortion to the businesses to force the people, and the business are in turn extorting the people with their jobs. If you don't take the jab, you get fired. So we have a double set of criminal actions going on here, which we as a people cannot stand for. We cannot allow this to happen. Because if we do, we will have absolutely no say about anything else in our lives from this point forward. That's how critical and important this is. We are literally in a state of crisis. And if the American people realize this and start standing up, we can turn the tables.
So how in the world is it that a government would extort businesses? Could you maybe pull that one apart? I mean, this is a government that is supposed to be protecting us. This is a government that we've been told protects us, that we elect. And so how is it, and perhaps this is a very silly question to ask, but how is it that the government can use extortion against businesses to fine them when this isn't even a law?
Because the government's communist. Here's your answer.
The government never follows its own laws, never. But the government expects you to abide by all of their unconstitutional laws.
That's what communist governments do.
The guys and gals who rule this country are the most evil beings that ever existed. All of them, without exception. Okay, right across the board. Even the so-called good ones, so-called good, and I put that in quotes, have put up with the evil and supported the evil. So how good is good if good supports evil? It's not good at all, okay? So we have to take a look at reality. We have to take a look at the existing realities that control and rule us. And the people have never done this. Well, let's take a look at the corporations, okay? The large corporations. Who do you think owns the large corporations?
Well, I think the accountants do.
Yes.
The government does.
Well, and the government are the accountants, are they not?
Yes, to a
Well,
great
then,
extent.
The driving
To a
force.
great extent, okay? If you take a look at the massive amount of money that the government has and what government has been doing with that, they have been buying up corporate shares, corporate wealth, and ruling corporations pretty much forever. So corporations, remember, are a creature of the state because the government gives the license, so to speak, or the existence, so to speak, to the corporations to exist and do business. That's number one. So the corporations are dependent upon the government for their very existence. What government gives to the corporation, government can take away from the corporation. Number two, if you look at the CAFA scams that have been going on, I don't want to get involved in this subject very
Another
much,
time, yeah.
but the government has been ripping money from the people forever. And part of that is in the CAFA scams, okay? In which government,
How do you spell that word, please?
CAFR, it's an acronym.
go ahead, spell it
It
out.
stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports. And that's where the real tallies are of what these corporate governments take in on a regular basis. When they discuss budgets with the people, supposedly, they never address the capital. They only address the budget, what they need for this year versus last year. They do not show the real tally and the amount of money, because if they did, the people would understand that there is no need ever for them to pay another cent in taxes. It's a huge scam. There's a fellow by the name of Walter Burien who helped bring this to light, expose it. And he's online too. You can probably look him up. Walter Burien, B-U-R-I-O-I-E-N, Burien. And he's got a lot of information on that. Some of it can be a little daunting to read, but it's something that is germane to what we're talking about here.
Well, let's go into that more deeply at another time. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Walter was a guest speaker at one of our seminars in California, no, in Arizona, right?
Arizona, yeah.
About 20 years ago, okay? And he laid it out very nicely for the American people. But again, the American people don't care. As long as it's not affecting them directly, they don't care. And that's the bottom line.
They don't
okay?
realize it affects them every single day.
And
This
even,
is what we mean. They
and-
don't know.
even if they did realize it, they wouldn't do anything about it, with the exception of a few here and there, a few groups, few organizations that get nowhere, because the courts are totally corrupt. And the courts always, well, not always, but if you look at the decisions of the courts, and I don't want to get off track here, but if you look at the decision of the courts, the vast majority of those decisions are political decisions by a judge that support the political structure of the governments in question, okay? The judges are appointed by governments. Theoretically, some judges are elected by governments, but the judges always support the governments over the rights of the people. So they issue political rulings, okay, based upon a political benefit for the existing political structure, rather than issue what we call judicial rulings, which they're required to issue, based upon the lawful merits of the arguments in the case, which is a very unfortunate situation. So getting back to the CAFRs are the investment arm of the governments. Now, theoretically, there are a lot of pension funds in those CAFRs, retirement funds in those CAFRs. Yes, that's correct. But beyond that are huge investment funds, okay? And these huge investment funds go into the market. Who controls the markets? The government and the accountants control the markets. The markets have been rigged forever. So when government is buying corporate stock and buying controlling interest in the corporate stock, who do you think controls the corporation? It's not necessarily the guy who's the president of the corporation or the CEO or the board of directors. It's really the government. Now, this may be a shock to most people, but this is how America works. There's really no free enterprise in America. We're supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, and it's more like the land of the free and the home of the slave. People just don't know actually what's going on. So when you say, how can the government control the corporations? The government gives the corporation life, and the government owns a great percentage of that corporation, if not the controlling interest in that corporation. So they can do whatever they want. Now, here you have Commie, Uncle Joe Blow, the acting president, the fraud, the guy who stole the election, the one man, one rule guy, which is classic communism, issuing unconstitutional orders to corporations to control the unconstitutional actions government wants to suppress the people. So what do we have here?
That's a mouthful, Jack.
Well, that's the way it is. It's
It
a very
is.
very
It
unfortunate
is.
situation. The corporations have no lawful requirement whatsoever. They have no constitutional requirement whatsoever to abide by any unconstitutional order issued by government. But when you look at the controlling interests again, and you look at the founding of the corporation again, you can see why government is controlling corporations. I mean, America loves war, doesn't it? I mean, we love war. The politicians love war. The corporations love war. Why? Because enormous money is spent on warfare to the corporations. Okay, so it's a fulfilling policy and profit for the government, which is a very unfortunate thing. Anyway, the American people, let's go to the American people, and we've said this before, have no constitutional requirement whatsoever to abide by any unconstitutional order. And that's a fact. The American people have no constitutional requirement to abide by an unconstitutional order. So when government issues unconstitutional orders that bind the people, and corporations issue unconstitutional orders that bind the people have to say, hell no, I won't go. That's a saying I came up with back in the old days, hell no, I won't go. And hey, LBJ, how many kids you killed today? And many, many other sayings that I came up with.
Long history of rebellion.
Yeah,
Yes.
a long history. It goes way, way back.
Thankfully.
Yeah, way back. I'm not sure how thankful.
Very incorrigible.
But anyway, the American people must understand their own rights, as Margie said before. They must stand up for their own rights. They must protect their own rights. Because if they don't protect their own rights, understand their own rights, know their own rights, they have no rights in today's communist America. I told you when I was going to college in Boston about the first president of Russia during the revolution, Kerensky, who used to tell his students and audiences who listened to him, he had a lot of people who listened to him in those days. He used to tell them that it weren't for the United States government in sending massive amounts of money, gold, armaments, tanks, planes, military, and food to fight for Lenin and his Bolsheviks against the whites.
The
There'd be no,
non-communists, yeah.
the non-communists in support of the Tsar in the moderate position. Okay, there'd be no communism in Russia today. So he was very proud of saying what the United States government did to create communism in Russia. Now, if you look at it, every county in America, every county, every jurisdiction in America, every town, I don't care where you go, federal, state, or local, does not support and uphold the Constitution, but every one does enforce the principles of communism and the Communist Manifesto upon the people all the time.
Yeah.
And the people have never seen it. Now, hopefully the people are beginning to see it. They don't see it yet, but they're beginning to see it, and that's growing. So if they begin to see it and they start growing in their awareness and they start growing in their, let's say, anger, okay, because of the fraud that's been perpetrated upon them forever, and because their rights are being damaged and the financial prowess is being damaged, if a guy or gal gets thrown out of a job, right, and no matter what the person is making, it could be 15 grand a year, it could be 250,000 or $1 million a year. If that person is thrown out of a job, how long can that person survive? How long can that person support his family, pay his rent, okay, or pay his mortgage, make his other payments, make his own payments? He won't. So we're going to have a massive amount of property on the market because people can't support it. And guess who's going to wind up with that property? Okay?
The accountants.
Just the way it goes. It's the way it goes. So it's
Didn't we see that in Detroit, Michigan?
Uh-huh.
Didn't we see that in Flint?
Yeah, it's the same pattern, same exact pattern. It's classic. It's textbook. It really is.
It's
Create a problem, implement the solution, and you win and the people lose. It doesn't matter what the issues are. It's always the same MO, always.
Yeah.
And I just saw today, I think it was on Yahoo or something, that this whole crisis of the illness, quote unquote, beep, beep, this whole crisis has caused 1 in 5 older people, couples, individuals, to use all of or most of their savings just to survive, okay? So couple that with the threat of 80 million people being kicked out of their jobs. Oh my, absolute devastation. And fertile ground for Big Daddy Tommy Joe to say, come on, we'll take care of y'all. We'll put y'all on welfare. We'll give you a nice supplement. Everything's gonna be fine. Yeah, that's where they're going. Yeah, you break everybody's bones. You take everything they have, and they'll say, okay, I have to feed my kids. I hate you. You're no good, but I gotta feed my kids. Where do I sign? That's what they're doing.
So this affidavit is giving people an opportunity to be able to
Yeah.
fight back.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Because
It's
what
empowering.
we're seeing and so what do people do? How do people get a copy of it? What is it that how do they use it? Tell us some of the ABCs of what this affidavit means, maybe even what is an affidavit. Most people don't even know that terminology.
Okay, first of
Yeah.
all, in terms of getting the affidavit, they can always email us and we'll send them a copy, okay? And our email is, which one do you want to
Take
use?
that.
Take back our rights at yahoo.com. That's take back our rights at yahoo.com. Secondly, we would prefer that people go to some of the social media sites where it's posted. And one of the sites is Telegram. Margie, maybe you could tell them about
Yeah.
that.
There supposedly is a link on Telegram. Now, I don't know if you have to be a member of Telegram to get to this link or not, but it was posted by Scott Richardson of Snafu Radio, the fellow I mentioned earlier, with whom I did the interview on Tuesday. You can also go to his YouTube channel, and again, he has some links posted there, and those could possibly be helpful too. But the most direct way to get it is to email us and we'll send it to you, or to look for it in some of these other places that we just mentioned.
Now, when Scott posted this on Telegram, in less than 24 hours, there were over 2,000 hits in less than 24 hours. We don't know what the current rate is now because we haven't accessed it. We're too busy to do much of anything because we've got this seminar coming up. All right, what is an affidavit? An affidavit is a statement of truth or an affirmation of truth. In fact, okay, by an affiant. All of the positions stated in the affidavit, at least in our affidavit, are based in truth, fact, law, and evidence, all of them. If you can't base something in truth, fact, law, and evidence, then don't use it. Don't put it in the affidavit, because the affiant, meaning the writer of the affidavit, is swearing to the truth of all of the positions contained in the affidavit, okay? Now, in our affidavits, we have several notices or warning clauses. One of the clauses states to the recipient that if he doesn't agree with the claims and charges stated in the affidavit, then he must rebut those charges, claims, statements, and averments in kind by means of his own sworn and notarized affidavit and support his rebuttal in truth, fact, law, and evidence. Well, it's pretty obvious if our charges and claims, statements, and averments that we make in our affidavit are based in truth, fact, law, and evidence, that no one can rebut any of those and support the rebuttal in truth, fact, law, and evidence, especially if the recipient is a government officer. Because then if he does so, he would be swearing to a lie and certifying the lie with his own signature.
Which is perjury.
And it's a crime. It's a major crime. All right. So over the years, I've told you, we've been doing this. I've been doing this since 1952. Margie's been doing it since, I think, the late 90s or so. And in all the affidavits that we have written, okay, both initially and together, there have to be millions of them now, okay? Because it's not only Margie and me, it's all our people, okay? And we're talking, almost 70 years. So you've got a lot of affidavits that have been written, millions of them, and not one has ever been rebutted by government, not one.
Oh.
Not our affidavits. Other affidavits are rebutted by government, but not ours, because of the warning clauses we have in them, okay? Another warning clause is that if you fail to rebut this affidavit by means of your own sworn and notarized affidavit supported by truth, fact, law, and evidence, then you tacitly admit to all of the charges and claims contained in this affidavit, fully binding upon you and that of those who represent you in any court in America. Okay, so we're telling them, number one, you have the right to rebut anything we've said. We're providing lawful notice to you of the charges and claims against you and your right to rebut any of these charges and claims supported by truth, fact, law, and evidence. Number two, if you fail to rebut, then you tacitly admit to all charges and claims levied in this affidavit against you, fully binding in any court without your protest, objection, or that of those who represent you, and that of those who represent you. Okay? No government officer is going to rebut that. He's not going to do it. Okay? So he admits by his omission, by his failure,
Silence.
by his silence, by his vacancy, okay, he or she admits to all the charges and claims. All right? Now, when you send an affidavit to government, the first step is sending that affidavit. That's step one. And you send the affidavit to the government officer who harmed you. Okay? That's very important. We usually give him 30 days to respond. If there's no, right now, we're not giving 30 days because of the crisis that's going on. We're giving 15 days. Some people are giving 10 days. Some people are giving 7 days. But Margie and I will stay with 15 days. The affidavit writer can provide whatever he wants in terms of response time. If he doesn't respond, if the recipient does not respond within that time, then we wait a few more days to see if anything comes in. And if nothing comes in, then we write individual affidavits to all the supervisory and oversight personnel of the original affidavit recipient, and we mean all, okay? So if someone works for a county, let's say he's in the school department, or he's whatever,
A
he's
health
a
officer
health
or something,
officer,
yeah.
he works, or he's a sheriff, he works for the county, okay? When he doesn't respond, we write to all of that county board, okay? Meaning
You said the
board-
county board?
Board
yeah,
of
the
Supervisors
board
or
of
commissioners.
supervisors, or the
whatever they
county
call it.
commissioners, the county manager, the county chief, all of them, okay? And it's a brand new affidavit that we write to each member, brand new. You have to make out individual affidavits to each member. And basically what we do is have the same boilerplate language that we have in our affidavit, as I discussed with you. And in the charges and claims section, all we say is something like this. On such and such a date, we sent an affidavit to such and such a public officer who egregiously violated our constitutional rights and in so doing damaged us. He has no constitutional authority whatsoever to do this. Now you, county commissioner, county manager, what have you, have been notified of these egregious unconstitutional violations committed by this person who's acting under your watch and under your supervision. It is now your duty and your authority pursuant to your oath and to the constitutional mandates imposed upon you by and through that oath to stop and correct these unconstitutional actions committed by that officer and or remove him from office. Okay? It's a very strong position. That's all you have to say in the section that takes the complaint, the complaints, the vermins, the statements, and the charges. Go ahead, if you want to add more.
You can tell them if you fail to do so, then you are complicit in, abet, and condone the unconstitutional actions committed by whoever the public officer is, okay? And you will be held accountable for it, okay? Because they have a duty, a fiduciary duty to the people to supervise the people that work under them. And when those people act unconstitutionally, violate the public rights and the public's trust, it's the duty of their next guy up to say, you can't do that, Frank, you gotta go, see you later. Most of these people will run for cover. They don't want to be held accountable for the actions of their underlings. So oftentimes the underling will get fired because they don't want to take responsibility and have their position in jeopardy should they fail to act. And that's why this is important. You have to let them know that they have a responsibility pursuant to their oath, and if they don't take it, they're in trouble. The most important thing for people to think about when they do an affidavit is that this is a means of communicating the harm that has been done to them or is being threatened upon them by through the actions of a government officer, or in some cases, somebody that they work for with this jab thing that's going on. And it is the best way to do so because it allows you to redress your grievances to either the government or somebody working under the government edict to make you do something that you don't want to do, that you think is harmful, and is something that you should have the right to say no to. It's a right that is guaranteed to the people. So using the affidavit gives them a strong voice to say what's going on, how they're going to be damaged, and that these people that who are being written to are accountable for their actions. And if they don't rebut anything, then they admit to them, as Jack said earlier, they admit tacitly that everything stated in the affidavit is true and correct. This means that down the road, if the person who wrote the affidavit wants to take it further and perhaps take the matter to a civil court for a lawsuit, they have tacit admissions to put on the record with their complaint that so-and-so did such and such to me, and I was harmed in such and such a way, and so-and-so never rebutted anything that was stated in the affidavit. And it's a very big thing to have admissions going in because a court assembles to hear controversy, an issue in controversy. That's why a court meets, one party versus the other. If one party has admissions from the other party of wrongdoing, and the party accused never rebutted anything about the wrongdoing, then the person holding those admissions is in a much stronger position than the person that's accused. Okay, it gives you a leg up if and when you have to go to court.
An unrebutted affidavit stands as fact and truth before the court, okay? An unrebutted affidavit stands as fact and truth before the court. And what is an affidavit? Well, an affidavit is an outgrowth of our constitutional rights guaranteed in the First Amendment to redress our grievances to government. And the affidavit is the best possible way to do this. A letter or a notice or some other form sent to government doesn't require any response from government. And when government doesn't have to respond, it doesn't respond. An affidavit requires government to respond if government disagrees. Government never responds and never rebuts because it's a lawful impossibility to do so. So when you go to court, like Margie said earlier, the courts convene to hear matters in controversy, okay? You have an affidavit that you put on the public record as an attachment to your complaint if you're a plaintiff in the suit. So you have a complaint against this officer. You attach the affidavit to the complaint as an exhibit. You file it with the court. The unrebutted affidavit stands as fact and truth before the court, okay? You have an opponent who never rebutted your affidavit. So what is his position? Zero. It's vacant. It's void. There's no comeback to the affidavit. There's no response to the affidavit. There's no opposition to the affidavit. So without opposition, since the courts convene to hear matters in controversy, and there's no controversy because your opponent admits to all of your charges and claims, the victory is yours, or should be yours, if you know how to hold the judge to his constitutional oath, and most people don't know how to do that. And I'll get into that just for a brief moment.
Well, let me ask you something. So a couple things that come up. We use the example here of if you worked for the county, but we can send an affidavit to a private corporation.
Yeah, when we're
Yes, of
talking about
course.
corporations that are threatening people right now, get the job or get fired. That's what we're talking about. Jack
Right.
went to the county because typically it's public servants that get these because of their unconstitutional actions. But corporations are creatures of the state. They are bound by the Constitution, just like the public offices are. And they must uphold the Constitution. And the Constitution does not permit anyone to take advantage of, disparage, infringe, limit, or violate the rights of any American, period, end of story. That is our rock. That's the place we have to stand on. And it's from that place that the affidavit is coming because it's supported in constitutional positions from the beginning, okay?
So,
That makes sense?
Margie, does that mean, yes, thank you, that's helpful. I didn't understand that corporations are bound by
Of course
the
they are. They're
Constitution.
creatures of the state, and the state is bound by the Constitution. So if they're creatures of the state, they're bound by the same things that the state is bound to, and that is the Constitution's national state.
Okay,
Remember-
so,
Yeah,
Remember, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Supreme means supreme. It oversees everything, okay? Nothing can bypass the Constitution in law, period. So the Constitution is the law for all people, public or private, it doesn't matter. Corporations are bound as well.
so does that mean I go into a health food store and, or I guess we're talking right now about employment. So let's say I'm an employee of a health food store. That's a private business.
Yes,
They still are creatures of, they still are bound by the Constitution.
yes, the Constitution is the supreme law. And it affects everyone, both public and private, corporate, business, doesn't matter. Everyone is subject to the Constitution. It's not just public offices, everyone. Supreme
So-
means supreme.
So this affidavit that you have written, anyone who's an employee in any circumstance can use this affidavit.
Yes, yes, if he so desires, okay? Now, let me explain. We did this affidavit as an example of what we would do if we were in that situation. We're not passing this out to people to use verbatim, exactly as we wrote it. We're saying that this is what we would do in any given situation if we were under these conditions, okay? Now, we load up affidavits when it's necessary because there are a lot of violations committed by government and committed by corporations. So we spelled out a lot of those constitutional violations in our charges and claims section, okay? Now, people can use those charges and claims as we wrote them if they so desire,
it fits their circumstance.
if it fits their circumstances, okay? Or not use them if they don't fit their circumstances, okay? The affiant, meaning the writer of the affidavit, must be careful of what he's doing because he's swearing that everything in this affidavit is the truth, okay? So when he swears to that, he must make certain that whatever he's saying in that affidavit is the truth as far as he knows it. Secondly, all affiants should put in their own charges and claims and specify how they have been harmed by the unconstitutional actions of governments and corporations. People can't just copy it without knowing what's in it and send it in. They must know what's in it. They must participate in it. They must be aware of all the conditions in it, all the charges, all the claims, because they're swearing to those. And if it goes to court, then they're going to have to back up and support what they said. If they don't know what's in the affidavit, they're the rube in the junk pile.
Yeah, exactly.
They're gone.
That said, it's not that difficult to do if you read it, because it's written in plain English, and that's something that Scott pointed out the other day, is that I like this. It's not legal jargon or legalese. It's common sense, plain English. If you can read beyond third grade level, you can handle this. And I said, yes, that's exactly. We wanted it to be direct and straightforward so people could get it. And once people understand the premise, what's in there and why, and they add their own special circumstances of, because the damages could be physical, it could be mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever, as well as financial. And the stress of worrying about whether or not they're going to keep their job or expose themselves to a horrific medical risk, that's a serious, egregious offense to commit upon anybody. So this should give people who are in a quandary some ammunition, so to speak, to get their truth out and to do it in a way that's lawful and legal and very strong. It has lawful and legal weight. Whereas a letter, as Jack mentioned earlier, they don't have to do anything. You send them a notice, they don't care. Yeah, if government were run properly and constitutionally, they would care. They would respond to every letter in kind, and to the same thing if they get notified about something. But that's not how it works, folks. The way it works is they'll do whatever they can get away with. And it's our fault as a nation because we've let them get away with everything. And now it's time for us to put on our big boy and big girl pants, grow up and accept responsibility for our political power and use it properly to stop the tyranny that's being imposed on every single American every day.
Let
Very
me
well
just
stated.
explain a little bit about how far that tyranny can go, and I think I touched upon this earlier, but this is very important. Approximately 80 million people are being affected, if not more. That's a lot of people. 80 million adults, that's a lot of people.
Mhm.
That's the number that voted for Trump, approximately 80 million people. Okay, so when you calculate it from that position, you can see how damaging it would be if 80 million people were thrown out of their jobs or fired from their jobs because they refused to take a jab that could severely and fatally injure them. Okay, that's a tough predicament to be in. If you don't want to lose your job and you don't want to take the jab that can harm you in horrible, horrible ways, then what are you going to do? All right. If people just say, fine, I'm not going to take the shot, just fire me, and they're fired, we're looking at about 80 million people now. Naturally, it's never going to figure out to that exactly, but approximately 80 million people are out of work. What do you think that's going to do to the economy? What do you think that's going to do to production, to shipping, to transportation, to available goods, okay, to
Everything.
prices? What do you think is going to happen to prices? What do you think is going to happen when people can't afford to pay their rents, pay their mortgages, pay their loans? Because America is a debtor country. I mean, we owe huge amounts of money to the accountants, lots of money. And when people can't pay those loans, they're out of luck. They lose their homes, they lose their boats, they lose their second homes, they lose everything. The kids don't go to college, everything falls apart, okay? Inflation's through the roof and no one's working.
But bear in mind too, we're talking 80 million people who are workers. Of those 80 million, many of them will have families that they are supporting. So think of the residual
It's
damages.
enormous.
It's
enormous.
mind-boggling what they are proposing and pushing. That's why we got to draw the line in the sand and say, no, we're not going to take it. We refuse to put up with one more second of your tyranny. You have no lawful authority. We're the government. We're supposed to tell you what to do, and we're telling you now, back off, get back in your constitutional box, or we're going to replace you. That's how simple it has to be, just like that. No pussyfooting around.
Now, we're asking people, all people that we're contacting or who are contacting us, to send this affidavit out to everyone they know, everyone, and to post it on social media that will accept the affidavit. Because if you take the figures from Telegram, there are over 2,000 hits within 24 hours when the affidavit was posted. I don't know what it is now. It could be 10,000 or more. I have no idea. But if you just take the 2,000 and you follow this brief formula, 2,000 people see it. If 10% of those 2,000 people, meaning 200 people, send the affidavit out to their lists, and at average, let's say 50 people a list, and those people have hundreds of people on the list, so let's say 50 people, then 200 times 50, right, adds to a figure, all right? And if you take that figure and follow the same process and the same method, 10% times 50, okay, adds to another figure. 10% times 50 adds to another figure. By the time you get to number six cycles, we're looking at about 40 million people having been reached. So it's important to get the initial base as high as possible. So those who are hearing us now, please send it out to everyone you know and post it on every social media site you can. And we thank you for that.
Very fine. Well, thank you for the work that you have put into this affidavit. I know that given all the other work you're doing and all the demands upon your time, this was a huge endeavor. So thank you very much. So go to YouTube to Snafu Radio and check out the video, and you will find the posting of the affidavit there. And otherwise, if you cannot find that, reach Jack and Margy at their address, their email. And Jack, could you repeat your email again, please?
Yes, it's take back our rights at yahoo.com.
Very
Take back our rights at yahoo.com. And it's also posted on Telegram. That was the initial posting. It got the 2,200 initial.
Very good. Now you're doing a conference this coming weekend. Could you talk a little bit about that before we close?
Yes, but one other thing I want to mention before we get into that. In this seminar, we are going to be presenting another affidavit for people who have lost family members due to problems, okay? Due to problems from professionals, all right? And this can be bigger than the first one, because this takes those who are committing these problems by hurting people to account. All right, so that's a major thing. Now, as far as the seminar is concerned, go ahead, Mark, you can talk about that.
It's going to be a 2-day event from 9 to 5 with an hour break for lunch, of course, which we'll need by then, I'm sure. And it's going to be an intense teaching seminar. It's going to basically cover constitutional methods that we've been using for decades, as well as the affidavit process that we discussed here. The whole thing from beginning to end, in order to get people up to speed as to how they can hold their politicians, bureaucrats, and companies and employers accountable for their actions. We will do quite a bit of discussion of some of the cases that we have won and other people who are our students have won, because we want people to see that if you use the Constitution in the proper manner, you can prevail even in a corrupt court. But you have to know going in that the court is going to be working against you as another opponent. It's not an objective arbiter as it's supposed to be, because the system is so corrupt. There is so much that people do not understand. And we will be discussing the collusion between judges and attorneys, which is absolutely wrong, but it goes on every day because they're the same fraternity. We're going to discuss how to work around that and how to hold the judge and the court to the constitutional mandates imposed by the judge and all public offices pursuant to Article 6, clauses 2 and 3. This is one of the most important aspects of the Constitution, and not very many people understand it. We will be discussing a lot of other issues and trying to get people up to speed to give them a better grasp on writing an affidavit, how to do so succinctly, and how to amass the proper facts to support their claims and charges. It's not a complicated process, but for people who are not used to writing in a formal manner, it can seem daunting. So we want to take some of the mystery out of it and make it friendlier, more people friendly. That's a big part of what we're going to do.
Very nice. And give the dates and where is this going to be, and how do people register, and must they be there in person, or is there going to be a video audio of this? How is
There will be a video of it. The seminar is being held Saturday and Sunday this weekend, October 2nd and 3rd in Cherokee Village, Arkansas at the Thunderbird Recreation Center. They can contact us by phone at 207-404-9093, or they can email us at takebackourrights@yahoo.com for more information. There will be a video available sometime after the seminar is complete, and we will be posting information about that as soon as we have that all together.
very fine. Well, and for those listening, I will be posting those links and the information on conference. And I want to say that I have really enjoyed all the four-legged creatures who've been coming and going and
Really
participating. Margie, you've had this beautiful white kitty at your shoulders, and the profile often shows.
That's Aiden.
No.
Well, so it's been a delight to be able to have them, be able to experience them during this interview.
They just wanted to get in on the act, that's all.
Apparently, well, this is for their freedom as well, as they well know.
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, thank you so very much, and it was a pleasure, and I wish you the very best at this conference this weekend, and we'll get this affidavit just flying as it is now.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
so
the
much.
opportunity, Kathleen.
Thank
And
you.
our best
God bless.
and speedy recovery to your friend.
Thank you.